Well, good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining us on this October 28th as we talk about some of the creative approaches to managing water collectively in communities in response to climate change, and just because it's a good idea. Let me share my screen to get started. I am Felicia Marcus, a board member at the Doherty Global Water for Food Institute. And I'm really pleased to be able to share these amazing people and their work with you this morning. We're going to be talking about some case studies in climate change adaptation. All of them are stories that show you what can happen when people come together creatively to manage a precious resource. You may wonder why climate change in particular, but climate change is something that affects every part of the world in different ways. And I put up a picture of the US for those of you who aren't familiar, and I know a lot of our viewers are not from the United States. We have very different hydrology across the United States, and what's referred to frequently as the 100th meridian as the dividing line between East and West. And it's not just a line on a map, it's a line that marks a very different weather system, a different geology, and frankly, different water rights management practices across the state. With climate change, the line dividing sort of the wet and the dry, so to speak, is marching its way west. And you can see it's marching, the line is getting closer to the real 100th meridian, which goes right through the heartland and right through the center of Nebraska, which is the center of our focus today. But you do have very different issues happening. In the East, you're going to have increased flooding and hurricanes and storms of increasing intensity. In the West is marked by variable hydrology, where we don't have rain in the summer, for example, and where the rainfall and snowfall vary dramatically from year to year, season to season, etc. Nowhere more so than in the state of California. So the extremes in the West of drought and flooding, we still will have some floods, are going to be more intense. And the flooding, if it doesn't cause damage and heartache, hopefully will give us a shot to capture some of our water into our groundwater basins, and that can compensate for the lack of snowpack that we're going to have over time with a few degrees of temperature rise. So essentially, the point about climate adaptation is simply that it puts more pressure in the West on an already challenging water management regime. Just to give you a little sense, with a few degrees temperature rise, we're going to lose our snowpack. The last drought we had, similar to the drought we have now in California, gave us a snapshot of the future that we're going to see more often, as even with the same amount of precipitation, it falls as rain rather than snow. In California, a huge part of our water system is based on a massive public works infrastructure of dams and conveyance, because storage is essential, because the rain falls in a non-predictable way year to year, as I said, and in season to season, and also doesn't fall in the area where it's most used. Snowpack is the single largest storage element in the California system, and if we don't have that, all the conflicts that you've heard about in the California water wars will seem like a picnic compared to what's to come. So as a result, we passed historic legislation in 2015 to call the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, to try and use our now overdrafted Central Valley basins and beyond, but primarily in the Central Valley, for storage, so that we can compensate for that loss of snowpack. That's going to take a long time. It's something that people are working at very vigorously on the ground, but it's something that takes an incredible amount of work. So you end up with pressures on our surface waters and pressure on our groundwater basins. And in some ways, that's why it's important to be looking to Nebraska, which has had a much longer history of more buttoned up or more specific both surface and groundwater management than California. A baseball player, a well-loved baseball player over the years in the United States, Yogi Berra, once said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. And I would say blessed are the practitioners, because in water, at least in California, and I suspect in other places as well, water can become more of a debating society than an action society from time to time. Adaptation requires us to step up and do things versus talking about things forever or talking about what someone else ought to do. These examples that we've brought together for you today of collective action, and collective action in some cases across traditional divides, both on surface water and on groundwater, and ingenuity in all cases, should help us end our conference with a note of hope and some confidence that there are creative people out there working across those traditional divides to really make the most of every precious drop of water for the benefit of all, for food and fiber and communities and sanitation and urban economic growth. We have a fantastic panel for you today. You will have two California examples intersected with an impressive Nebraska example to try and end your conference on an up note. I'll give you a very brief description of our speakers, and then you can go to the website to find out more about them, because there's a lot about them all. First, you'll hear from Roger Cornwell, who's the general manager of River Garden Farms. It's a family-owned and operated farm, a 15,000-acre diversified farming operation located in Northern California, north of our Sacramento area. And he oversees the day-to-day operations, but he's always looking at innovative ways to partner and make things happen. In the case of Roger's work, it centers around the Sacramento River and all of Northern California. And he holds all kinds of board memberships on both local and more statewide water management groups, and is really seen as a bridge builder and a doer. And I'm a huge fan of him, as I am of everybody else on this panel. Next, we'll have Renata Rimšaitė, who is the postdoctoral research associate and the water markets program manager at the Doherty Institute, and also has a position at the National Drought Mitigation Center, both at the University of Nebraska. She joined a couple of years ago as a postdoc and has a doctorate from Penn State. Christina Babbitt and Eric Averett will be sharing the stage to talk about some innovative work between the environmental community and the local agricultural community to do some really innovative work in responding to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that I talked about. Christina is the director of climate resilient water systems at the Environmental Defense Fund, one of our national environmental groups. And she works on water sustainability practices across the spectrum. She's on the board of the California Water Data Consortium, as is Eric, which is a new entity created in just the last few years to really up the viability, the visibility, and the integrity of using water data across California, really a labor of love. She has a PhD in natural resources from the University of Nebraska. So we have these interwoven connections on this panel. Eric Averett is the CEO of Homer LLC, which is a company that's developed an unparalleled network of water sourcing, storage, and distribution assets to sustainably supply water to Central Valley farmers. Before that, he was the leader and the general manager of the Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District. Again, one of the pioneers and leaders in using innovative management practices to deal with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and just to manage groundwater more creative. You'll hear a bunch about all of that. You'll want to hear more. I'll let them all speak for about 10 minutes or so each segment, and then I'll ask a question or two, and then we'll move to your questions, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and look forward to hearing from Roger first. So take it away, Roger.
thank you everybody for the opportunity, and glad to be here this morning, kind of in a little bit of a dreary Northern California day where we've got a few clouds in the sky. We just had some great rain, which is always very nice. But what I'm really excited to talk to you about today is really what we're coining a term of the new way forward, really bringing out the fix versus the fight. I think the California water wars have been well documented over the last century, and we're just trying to bring a new way forward to what we see here on the Sacramento River. And really, it's creating better solutions to save all the native salmon that are the large driver of the Sacramento River. You know, and I just want to take a brief second to tell you who River Garden Farms really is. And you can see them right there in this picture. We are a large farming operation owned by two families out of Texas, actually, and I'm the general manager. But this is really the driving force of who River Garden Farms is, and we really try to stay within. We've done some extensive strategic planning, and really, you know, we really want to be a model for sustainable farming in harmony with the environment for the 21st century. And those are not just words, but those are things that we take very seriously, and the employees here all take very seriously. Let me tell you what I have to talk about today, and that's basically on the Sacramento River. We have 4 unique runs of salmon. 2 of them are listed. One is on the endangered species list, the winter run salmon. And that was also featured, that poor guy was featured in the National Marine Fisheries Species in the Spotlight in 2015, because the numbers were getting so low at that point. And really, that has been the big focus of this collaborative effort that I'm proud to be part of, is really trying to bring back these native runs of salmon. But let's take a kind of a step back in time, and let's really talk about, you know, or give you a little sense of history of California. When in that early 1900s, people began to flock to California. There was a gold rush here. You know, we have an amazing population explosion. We began to build cities, farms, roads, irrigate fields, rein in rivers for flood control purposes. And in the early 1900s, we were able to construct what is now the flood control system for California, and essentially divorce or separate that water and land that we're finding out, you know, 100 years later is so very important. I need to push the buttons in the right way. So what we've been left with is really kind of a very channelized system here. You know, the landscape is very different than how it used to be. You're looking at very narrow riprap river. That's the Sacramento River, as it goes by our farming operation here in Northern California. And for salmon, that river just is not the native habitat they're used to. That river now is too deep. It's moving too swift to really create the food, have the environment they need to survive. So if we look at in the early 1900s, that was the floodplain of California. You know, it was one of the largest in the world. And today we have about 5% of those floodplains left. And so it's really, in my mind, you know, it's easy to make that leap why we only have about 5% of our native fish runs left here in California. So sitting with a lot of biologists and really coming up with ways that we can help here in California and on the Sacramento River, and being in where we're at with Lake Shasta and Shasta Dam, one of the largest, it's the largest reservoir here in California. Developed this kind of life cycle salmon. We've really dug into this, and I really want to take you on a journey of what we work on here in Northern California. And that's really the first 3 stages. And we really try hard to have a positive impact on these 3 stages because we really feel like that's in our wheelhouse. That's our environment. We can do a lot of good things for these 3 life cycles. And I'm going to walk you through a couple projects that I'm really proud to be part of. And again, we're just part of the group, you know, and this has been a very collaborative and collective group as we move forward. And at the end, I'll show you some of the group members that are in this new way forward group that we like to call it. So just a quick little bit of history. Again, the winter run salmon typically would spawn above Lake Shasta. But now, because of Shasta Dam that was built, and it was built for good reason, for flood control for Sacramento, and to also be a big part of the CVP, the Central Valley Project here in California, it is effectively cut off the spawning grounds that were so vibrant for winter run salmon. So we've decided below the dam that we can mimic these spawning sites with gravel injection. And here's just a few pictures of us moving gravel, the group putting gravel and actually laying it out in a strategic pattern so it can move downstream on high flows. Sorry about that. The results have been great. We've seen more reds being developed in areas there. We've actually created more acres of habitat to give the spawning salmon more room to create, so they don't superimpose. And that is when a salmon will lay eggs over the top of another nest. So they just needed more room and kind of get the overcrowding out of the way. So we've been able to add approximately 12 to 14 more acres on an annual basis. And the next step on that life cycle was really fry rearing, after they've emerged from the gravel, making sure that these juvenile fish have a place to go and hide from predators, and also get out of the velocity so they have a chance to actually grow and become a little bit bigger before they move on downstream. So, you know, just for a little bit of background, the fish do have to make about a 300-mile journey from where they're born to the Pacific Ocean before they spend about 3 years in the ocean, and then they return as spawning adults. Again, another big challenge presented downstream of the dam, just below the spawning site, is there's just no ephemeral streams coming in, so there's no habitat replacing what's been lost there. And so you don't get that nice blend of woody debris coming in or boulders moving. So the juveniles, as they emerge from the gravel, really have no place for refugia there for velocity or predator protection. So the project that we spearheaded is we came up with what we thought would be a simple idea, is to take large 6-ton boulders, and we bolted on basically tree trunks, if you will, what we call root wads. And we set those in the Sacramento River just below the spawning site. And I got to play on a barge on a crane in the middle of the river, which is pretty exciting. But we were able to, we GPS these sites, they're tracked, we monitor them on an annual basis. And this was a project that was done in 2017. We were able to put 25 structures in the river there as a pilot project, and we're seeing some amazing results. We're able to use Ditson radar and get in there, and we're seeing more juveniles hold in this 1/4-mile section of the river than they've ever seen before. And the last part is really where the farm, you know, those first 2 projects are 200 river miles north of where my farm boundaries are. But, you know, we don't try to stop at a distinct boundary line. We're here to fix versus the fight. So we'll travel from beginning to the end to really try to bring back, you know, juvenile salmon here on the Sacramento River. And this is some of the great work that I'm just really excited about, because it happens outside my office door. And that is using our rice fields that we grow food for people on in the spring and the summer, using them in the winter to create food for fish. They're also, you know, amazing habitat for the Pacific flyway in the fall. Again, just, you know, if you look at this map, you can mimic that I take you back to how the floodplain used to be. And here in the Sacramento River, we have about 500,000 acres of rice on an annual basis. And what we're discovering now is this is just an amazing spot to grow food for fish that we can export back to the river, because we're in the lowest part of the basin. We pump water in, we pump water out. So fish aren't going to do well during that. So we can grow the fish food here and get that back to the river. And that, again, is just what we're doing. We're using our fields in the winter months and getting this amazing amount of bioenergy back to where it can be used. And it's funny because these shallow puddles, when you think about it, we're breaking down carbon that's left over in the fields after harvest, and that turns into algae. And then that turns into the magic sauce right there, the bugs. Flea daphnia, water fleas or daphnia is what it really makes. And we can transport that back to the river through our conveyance system and our drainage system here. And this is the most amazing picture that I really like to stop and talk about, is because you're looking at two fish, two juvenile salmon, the exact same age. One of them has spent his entire, that's about 6 weeks old in the Sacramento River. And the bottom one is what happens when they get access to the floodplain or actually food from the floodplain. And you can see that amazing difference there. And that, that bottom fish is just so much stronger, able to survive his journey onto the sea. So during the first 3 stages, these life cycle stages, if we boost access to food, provide some adequate shelter, and we can mimic those spawning sites, we feel like we're going to have more adult salmon coming back from the ocean than we've had in recent history. And again, here's some of the partners that I really want to highlight. And you have private farming companies, you have agencies, and you have water districts, north and south of the Delta here in California. So I think it's just showing you that the new way forward is taking hold here, and very proud to be part of that. And again, thank you for allowing me to take you on this journey, and hopefully we have some time for questions later. And my contact information, I'm sure that'll be available later also if anybody needs it. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Roger. That was great. And everybody can see now why I was so excited to have you be a part of this panel. A whole host of folks in agriculture working to grow fish as well as food, other kinds of food, in a way that's incredibly constructive and inspiring and creative. So thank you so much. It just makes me smile ear to ear whenever I hear you speak. So thanks so much. Now let's turn to the heartland and the land that's way ahead of us in water management. And I'm going to turn it over to Renata to give you a sense of sort of the scale and the ingenuity and the details of even more sophisticated set of water partners working to figure out how to make the most of each drop.
All right, well, hello, everyone. I am very excited to be part of this panel today talking about using water policies to adapt to climate change. And as Felicia said, my case study is about agricultural groundwater markets in Nebraska. Water markets are not a new tool used to address water variability, but what makes them unique in Nebraska is that they've been active for a long time. They are very different across Nebraska, and they're highly regulated by local governments, which is uncommon, especially when it comes to groundwater management. And given growing interest in putting stronger restrictions for groundwater management and implementing more groundwater markets in different areas, including California and other states, Nebraska seems to be a great place to study them. So today I will share a few highlights that I learned about them so far. But first, let me give you a little bit of context and briefly mention what is behind these water transfers in Nebraska. Nebraska has the most irrigated acres in the United States, and majority of them are irrigated with groundwater. However, the demand for irrigation water is not uniform across the state. Water availability is highly variable comparing eastern Nebraska to western Nebraska, which is highly dependent on the average annual rainfall, which, as you can see from the map here, varies from under 14 inches of rain to above 34 inches of rain in the southeast. And because of that, water quantity in Nebraska is more strictly regulated in the western portion of the state. And as a result, water management tools, including water markets, are more popular in that part of the state as well. Now, severe drought events, like the 2012 drought, which was very significant in the High Plains region, do make water managers and producers want to be better prepared the next time such a drought hits. And in those times, flexible risk-reducing water management tools become more critical across the entire state. And it is expected that in the future, eastern portion in Nebraska and other states like Iowa or Illinois that currently are highly dependent on rain-fed agriculture will be irrigating more frequently and will need to depend on strong water institutions that are capable of administering safe and flexible water transfers. Groundwater in Nebraska is managed by 23 natural resources districts via locally elected boards of directors to prioritize local needs. They are responsible for ensuring long-term water sustainability and preventing groundwater depletion. And so to meet those sustainability goals, many districts require groundwater use reports, metering, they impose well drilling moratorium, enforce water allocation, and regulate and administer groundwater transfers. Now, surface water transfers and hydrologically connected groundwater and surface water transfers also happen in Nebraska, but they are regulated by different government agencies or combination of them. And so due to time today, I'm only talking about groundwater transfers. Water transfers are a popular idea because, as I mentioned, they provide flexibility by reallocating water to where and when it's most needed, which reduces risk for producers. And in Nebraska, there are two types of groundwater transfers. So formal transfer of water involves a transfer of a property right, and they're most often understood as a transfer of certified irrigated acres. Another type of groundwater markets, which is a lot more active, is informal transfers, and it does not include a transfer of a property right. There are different types of informal transfers, and they are regulated. The most common informal transfers are transfers that allow joint operation of two or more irrigated tracts, and that is often called pooling. Interestingly, people usually do not think of pooling as water transfers, but as a combined or common water allocation management. Other type of informal transfers is the one that allows landowners to pump groundwater from their well onto a neighboring parcel that is under different ownership. So also, as you can imagine, administrative process is much simpler and cheaper for informal transfers, and it does not include an analysis specific to impacts to stream flow, which is done when applying for formal transfers. Now, talking about impacts to stream flow, there are different conservation and environmental goals across Nebraska, and as a result, they differently affect decisions about approving water transfers. Besides the statutory responsibility to ensure the long-term sustainability of water supply, some natural resources districts need to more carefully manage how groundwater pumping affects stream flow due to additional responsibilities from interstate compacts and federal endangered species programs. For example, most districts require no net increase in stream flow depletion. There are some that require no net change in stream flow depletion. And transfer rules are designed in a way that account for those regulations. These transfer rules vary due to different hydrogeology that I mentioned at the beginning. And as I mentioned also, they vary by transfer type. And with informal transfers, there's usually no accounting for impacts on streams. All right, so you're getting an idea. Groundwater transfers are very variable in Nebraska, and they continue to vary in terminology used, in transaction cost, and also in how active these markets are. So let me just quickly share a few more specific examples. All right, so if you find yourself wanting to study rules and regulations in each natural resources district, For formal transfers, you should be looking for terms like reassigning of certified acres, permanent transfers of acres, and transfers. For the informal transfers, and there are different kinds of those, we have the words pooling, which is the most common one. But at the same action can also be defined as pre-existing allocation units or designated allocation units. Sometimes also informal groundwater transfers are called groundwater transfers. So as you can see, it can get confusing pretty easily for an analyst. And so reaching out and talking to people who are working in these local natural resources districts is really necessary. Transaction costs, this is a significant one because it translates to different dollar amounts for the applicants, and they can play an important role in incentivizing or discouraging local transfers. So the main costs that I want to mention to highlight here are transfer impact analysis fee, which can vary from $0 to $20 and to $10,000. Administrative application fee differs from $0 to $200, and also the title search cost can also add another few $100s, and it can be more if search goes to a different county within the district. And there are no such transfer costs for informal transfers. Okay, for transfer sizes, sometimes there is a minimum transfer requirement, which varies from 1 to 4 acres, and sometimes there isn't one. In practice, transfers most of the time vary between 7 and 140 acres, which correspond to the center pivot corner sizes and the size of full center pivot. Also for informal transfers, the sizes depend on groundwater allocation and irrigation needs. Okay, and finishing with transfer activity. So for formal transfers, it can vary from less than 1 transfer a year to more than 200 transfers per year. And that variation again is by district. So higher activity correlates with commodity prices. For example, this year, as the prices of corn were increasing, most districts I spoke with reported having a lot more transfer applications. For lower activity, transaction cost might have an impact. And so also for informal transfers, there might be no transfers if a district doesn't have any of them. And in some districts, about 35% of wells are managed jointly. So there's a lot of transfers. Okay, and I am going to end here. Here to my right are the main highlights of my talk. I know I talked a lot about variability, but I do think that learning from it and what's behind it can be helpful when implementing similar markets elsewhere. And now I'm looking forward to the discussion and questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. That was great and so interesting. And you totally have to share how you did that with your PowerPoint. That was the coolest. And actually something that would really be great for other people. It's better than having the thumbnail at the side. It really, it makes a difference. You made something very complicated seem very personal and real and fascinating. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to turn it away to the dynamic duo of Christina and Eric to figure out how to choreograph together, talking about the work that they're doing to make more with less.
Thank you, Felicia, and I appreciate the opportunity to present with Christina today. Christina and I worked together on developing a water accounting platform. And we're going to walk through some of the issues, challenges, and hopefully some of the benefits that result from that effort. Let me start off. You had mentioned the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and it might be helpful to put context to that water accounting platform with that framework. And so the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act really is a mandate from the state that the Central Valley, which is arguably the most productive farming region in the world, manages its groundwater resources in a sustainable fashion. And at the simplest and most fundamental level, what that means is that we live within the budget. And so historically, the Central Valley had extracted significantly more groundwater than was able to be naturally replenished. And the consequence of that was obviously declining water levels and in many cases, water quality issues. And the drought of 2013 to 2015, really stressed the region. The map on the left is the Central Valley kind of highlighted. Hopefully you can see my cursor. And the southern portion of the Central Valley that's colored in red was designated by a state agency, the Department of Water Resources, as critically overdrafted. And what that meant was that was a region that had really extracted significantly more on an annual basis groundwater than was able to naturally replenish. And SGMA, again, was a mandate that over a period of time, we adjust our consumptive use of water to fit within a sustainable or balanced water budget perspective. And so in partnership with the Environmental Defense Fund, which Christina is going to represent, one of the local water districts, which at the time I managed, put together a water accounting platform. So we're going to walk through a little bit of what that accounting platform does and some of the unique features of it, such as water trading and how we've developed a demand analysis system within that. So really, we started out with two objectives when we started the effort. First and foremost was to give the overlying water district, which had responsibility for kind of managing its portion of the groundwater basin, the necessary information to be responsive to the regulation. And so in order to report to the state our performance and to demonstrate compliance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, we needed good information. And the water accounting platform was the approach that we took to do that. But also another objective that we wanted to incorporate into this, because we could certainly do that at a very high level, but we felt that it was very necessary for the landowners that we represented to have good information and real-time information to inform their decisions. That water was really a resource that they needed and used to drive economic productivity within the region. And we didn't want to be in a position where, by not providing them the necessary information, that we were compromising their ability to make decisions, but also to manage that very, very important resource. So I'm going to use this graphic to kind of walk through the different components. And hopefully, again, some of these are going to be interesting. I'll start with the very top. And so we, in partnership with a number of different entities, including NASA and basically agencies throughout the United States, identified an opportunity to use satellite-based data to track consumptive use at the field level. And it's a very, very powerful tool that we found gives us almost real-time information relative to how much water is being used. And this may be somewhat foreign concept, but at least within this region, many farmers did not know how much water they were applying or even using on their fields. That they're in the district that I managed, very few wells had meters. And so we needed a very cost-effective way to give them that information, because at the end of the day, they were going to have to live within this water budget. And so there's an organization called OpenET, and we were able to incorporate that information as it became available on usually about a 6-week cycle into the platform so that the users could log in. It's web-based, and very quickly see how much consumptive use or how much water had been used on their properties. That information feeds into their water budget, which is an online system, very much like your bank account. If you log in to whatever bank you use, more than likely, you'll be checking your account balances and looking to make sure that something cleared. Well, this is no different. It's structured very similarly. We felt that there was some familiarity associated with that, and we wanted to make the platform very user-friendly. If we go to the very bottom of the graphic part on the right, the water supply information is provided by the district. And so on the top, the consumptive use or the demand is provided by the satellite system. The district inputs the water supply information. And then we've got a couple of graphics that kind of illustrate what that looks like. But the water supply information is a combination of precipitation, their share of what native groundwater yield is actually available, not this unlimited supply that was historically perceived to be there. And then any surface water supplies that the district has developed, whether they be through contractual arrangements or purchases. And then to the left, I will talk a little bit about the water trading platform. And so while we built and designed this primarily as an accounting platform to inform decisions and to be responsive to regulations, with the idea that we would empower landowners to manage the resource for their benefit, we wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity. So by way of example, if a landowner said, you know, this year the commodity prices on potatoes doesn't look very good, they would still have to pay the district a fixed fee for the water, but they didn't have a way of recouping that. And so we created a water trading platform that allowed landowners to basically put their water into the market as a seller, but also see what water was in the market as a buyer, with the idea that we didn't want the asset stranded. We wanted them to have the ability to manage and generate economic value. And ultimately what that's going to do is drive water to the highest and best use. And we feel that ultimately that is an appropriate and responsible thing to do as we try to get the sustainability concept in place. And so the last item that I'll touch on this particular slide is the modeling scenarios. And so within the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, there are a number of mandates that we manage the basin to. And so it's not just a water budget, it's water quality, water levels, and a host of other things. And so we wanted to make sure that the water trading that we provided or allowed did not jeopardize our ability to comply with and be protective of the groundwater basin. And so there was a tool that was developed, and Christina can confirm this, I think it was within the Nebraska region, that allowed us, thank you, that allows us to, in essence, predict or project the impacts associated with various volumes of trades in various regions. And so we can say, hey, you know, there's a certain volume that can be traded safely without jeopardizing any of these metrics that we're measuring. But maybe beyond that, we need to slow down or even put the brakes on because it may impact water levels for a particular disadvantaged community, or it may enhance a contaminant plume that we don't want to move. And so very, very powerful tools and available as part of the platform in the trading. I have a couple of screenshots that might be helpful to kind of show what the landowners would see. On the left-hand side is the management dashboard. And so that's what the water district sees. And that's where everything is rolled up to. And so from a reporting to the state perspective, on the left-hand side, you can kind of see some numerical values where we're able to take the overall district information. And so whether it's project water, reconciliation water, native yield, I won't get into the details, but basically those are all the different buckets of water that the district has available. And we're just managing that. And the goal or the objective for the district is to have the total supply equal to or greater than, ideally, the total demand or the total usage. On the right-hand side, you can see what I would characterize as more of the landowner dashboard, and it has some of the features. And so as you can see, they have actually their parcels enrolled as individual landowners, their allocation of water that's available to them from all of the different sources. Did they purchase any? Did they sell any? And then you can see the total supply that's available. And then it's real time in the sense that if you logged in February, it would update based on supplies and demands. And so the graphic on the right gives them the ability to not just see where they are today, but also there's a projection so they can look and see, hey, what was my average annual usage? Or how much did I use in 2020 versus 2019? And so again, the idea with the platform is to inform decision-making, both at the district level, but also at the landowner level. And then the marketing platform is very, very fascinating. We really struggled with this. We did borrow from examples, Nebraska obviously being one of them, but this is fairly new for California. And so the approach that we took was more along the lines of what I would call Craigslist, which is kind of this, I'm going to post that I have water available. You can see it, and then we can negotiate a transaction. And then ultimately the district will ask the landowners to confirm the transaction, as opposed to taking on a more active role where we become a broker of water between the landowners. And so this was kind of our initial dipping our toe into the water marketing arena, but I do expect and anticipate that as it becomes more used and more familiar, that the district may take a more active role and maybe learn some of the lessons that have been put in play through Nebraska. And so with that, I think I would like to turn it over to Christina and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And so just continuing on with the platform, it was really important for both EDF and Rosedale that the platform be developed using open source code, which essentially means that other water agencies can contribute to modify the platform to meet their own needs without subscription fees or license fees. And this really enables the platform to be able to scale in ways that are more cost effective, which is really important in a place, especially like California, where you're working with over 250 local groundwater agencies who are all going to need to develop different accounting tools to better understand their water use and availability. The next slide. Thanks, Eric. And it's really exciting with this project to see the vision growing and the real need for accounting throughout the state. In May of this year, we announced a really exciting partnership with the California Department of Water Resources, the California State Water Resources Control Board, and the California Water Data Consortium, some big players in California, along with EDF, to further develop and scale the accounting portion of the platform. And our collective goal with this project is to develop an optional, accessible open source water accounting platform that integrates a variety of data to effectively communicate this information to support local, regional, and state water management decisions. Next slide. And so in this scaled version of the work, we're really going to be focusing in on two components. First, we'll be looking at platform scaling and also co-development of data standards. So in terms of the platform scaling, we'll be expanding the accounting functionality to meet a broader array of landowner and water manager needs. We recognize that the groundwater management districts in California are very unique in some ways, but also share some similarities. So how can the platform be of use to the broader community? And then we'll also be working, as Eric mentioned, the Olson engineering tool, the GET tool, to better integrate the scenario planning aspects of the platform into the project. And you can see the whole host of partners on the screen that are part of that work. And we recently received a Bureau of Reclamation Applied Science grant to move that work forward. So that's really exciting. And then the California Water Data Consortium had already been starting an effort to look at the co-development of data standards, which of course, when you're talking about accounting across different political boundaries, this is a big challenge and something we really need to focus in on, and how that data can be shared and then scaled up to inform decision making. And so I'll transition to the next slide. Our effort is really meant to be collaborative and to listen to the voices on the ground and be responsive of what the needs of different users are. We've held a series of different public meetings, targeted outreach, and we're really fortunate to have brought together a number of different working groups to really dive into development of the platform with us to help guide implementation in ways that best meet local needs. Next slide. So this is, I won't go into detail here, and I know we want to save some time for questions, but we are focused right now on the accounting platform functionality. Next year, we'll start the scenario planning work funded by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And then all of this really is going to support different management actions like trading. You can't move forward with things like trading if you don't have an understanding of your water budgets, who owns what water through different allocations. And really, this is a broad vision to support well-designed water trading programs into the future. And then the last slide just shares a number of resources that our team has developed. You can log on to our demo platform, get an account, and see the full functionality of the platform. We've created a nice story map, and all the code is open, so you can go and explore that if you're on the technical side of things. And with that, I'll turn it back to Felicia.
All of these presentations have something in common that may not have jumped out, which is the intersection of farms and natural resources and figuring out how to do it. In the case of the California SGMA, there is a requirement that will work its way into that water budget that Eric talked about that involves interconnected surface waters and flows and a connection to the environment as well. I really, that's part of why I joined the Doherty board, because it does deal with the intersection of food and water and natural resources all in one. And I want to thank our panelists for talking about some of the real detailed work one has to do to make that all come together. they're all of their proposals are about, all of their presentations are about partnerships, some unlikely to meet multiple collective needs. And I would say all of them demonstrate what I see as really true leadership. There's a lot of bombast in people's perception of leadership, but to me, true leadership is doing the tough work on the ground that it takes to actually make things happen for more than just yourself. And in every single one of these examples, you have folks figuring out how to help each other and how to achieve an objective for their community as a whole. And this kind of thing just really gives me hope. We have one question so far from the audience. I'm going to take a quick answer it, but I'm going to let the panelists think about my question to all of them, and also think if they have any questions for each other in the few minutes we have left. And what I'd like you quickly to say is, in the work that you've been doing, either the research you've been doing or work on the ground, what's the biggest challenge been to achieving? What do you see as the biggest challenge to people really getting the most pop per drop, as my friend Ellen Hannock always says? And then what surprised you most as you went into this work? Because people have an idea about some work, but in my experience, when you actually dive in beneath the surface, you find things that you never would have thought of. So think about your answers to those questions. One question we have has to do more with adaptation and climate, which is global temperatures are rapidly increasing, which indicates the extremes are more influential. Is there any research exploring the physical process that leads to this increase of temperature and associated precipitation extremes? And I would direct the audience to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change series of reports over the past decade or more. I think there've been I think they come out every 5 years, and there's a lot in there about how climate change and greenhouse gases create that increased temperature, and how increased temperature ends up driving the extremes in weather. In part, just a simple fact is, with each degree temperature rise, the atmosphere holds 7% more water. That's a lot more water. That means it's holding more water at some times, and when it lets it go, it has more to let go. And when it holds more water, there's less that falls during the normal time. So again, why climate change, that we end up with a change in the patterns that we've been used to. So that's a layman's example, but there's quite an amazing volume of science around how that happens. So with that, I'm going to go back to Roger to answer the question. What was the biggest challenge and what surprised you most?
I think one of the
we only have about 6 minutes, so just briefly.
Just keep it real brief, Ben, right? One of the biggest challenges that I think we're still facing is the amount of hurdles, of agency hurdles that are put in place to actually go in and do projects, right? We're doing projects on the ground that are environmental projects, and we still keep bumping into these permits and things, and working with others that aren't on the panel today. I think we're starting to streamline that, but just for the Root Wad project, we had 12 different state permits to get, and it took 18 months to get those permits. So that was one of our biggest challenges, and I think the surprise is a pleasant surprise, and I think that just goes back, when people see something good happening, they want to be part of that. When success builds success. So we're expanding our little group here almost on a daily, weekly basis. We've got a lot of people that really want to step up and be part of that, and that just gives me a big sense of hope and pride that we're going to keep this momentum really rolling. Thank you. Not just you, the rest of us too. Renata, take it away.
Yes. So my, due to time, I'm just gonna combine my biggest challenge and biggest surprise was to understanding and dealing with the variability across Nebraska. How different all these natural resources districts are in prioritizing their needs and in the way they're addressing them. when I always wanted to study water management at a local level. I wanted to understand the pain points of producers and water managers. And when I came to Nebraska and started studying the 23 natural resources districts and knowing that they all have their websites and they all share all their information publicly, I was very excited. But then when I dig into rules and regulations and understand that the terminology is so different, it becomes frustrating and it's at the same time exciting. So going through these hoops, that was challenging, but and something that I didn't expect. But then also I think there is a reason for this difference across Nebraska too, because they're focusing on the needs on local people, and that's meeting them where they are at.
That's great. Now I'm going to turn it to Christina and Eric, but I also want to encourage you to answer. Now the questions are flooding in, which is to talk about how if the OpenET tool is available beyond California and in other places. We can just work that in to your answer, and maybe even answer that one instead, since it's come from our audience. And then I can handle the other two questions quickly at the end, because they fit in with what I was going to say at the end.
So Christina, I'll jump onto the question and then kick it to you for the response to the question about the tool. But the biggest challenge was introducing some of the technology. Farmers in the Central Valley typically aren't used to the idea of satellites measuring consumptive use. And so the challenge was really just educating them on the opportunity. The surprising thing was once they saw how valuable the tool was, and in fact, in some cases, the satellite showed that within their specific fields where their irrigation efficiencies were not very good. They're like, yeah, I always wondered why my yields in that particular area weren't very good. They adopted it and they embraced it. And so I think, starting off and not forcing the technology, but explaining how and why it works led to the pleasant surprise of having a very quick adoption. Christina?
That's great.
Yeah, so in regards to OpenET, it's a really exciting project. The project officially launched October 21st, so just last week. So anyone could go to the OpenET website, and I can put that in the chat. But essentially, the data is available across the Western US, and it's open to small, large agricultural users alike. Anyone can go and look at the data. And so I encourage you to check it out. And if you have questions, there's a lot of contact information. But that project was NASA, Desert Research Institute, Google Earth Engine, University of Nebraska folks were also involved, many, many, many partners involved in that work. And then really quick, there was a question in regards to the accounting platform. And our partners, Sitka and Olson Engineering, have worked with different NRDs within Nebraska to leverage certain aspects. And that's the great nature of the open source. So it's exciting to see it scale.
That's great. I think we could do a whole hour on each one of your presentations because there's so much to dive into. There are a couple other questions that are general that I want to just take a quick swing at, and then I want to turn to a closing question. And can all of you stay just a few minutes over, since we're the last panel of the day? Great, because I want you to also think about, with all the math, again, you could each do an hour-long panel, and I think we could all benefit from it. But if people take away one thing from your presentation today, what do you want to make sure that they take away from it? Couple questions. One is that beyond these case studies, what are others you suggest looking at? What are your favorites that could be scaled or transferred to other areas? And I love this question now that I'm an academic and in part at Stanford. Part of why I'm doing it is to be able to illuminate the case studies of hope that we see, since the airwaves are always so filled with the conflicts, the distraction, and the seeming impossibility of surmounting our challenges. It has been great to be able to spend time looking at them, and they span the urban and the agricultural arena. But there are case studies in particular all over California where beyond the war of words that it took to get the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act passed, the act was intentionally designed in order to give the leadership to locals to solve what is essentially a local problem about planning for the future and sharing a collective precious resource, which is their groundwater basin. And so what you have, as in Rosedale, Rio Bravo, and in so many others, is an explosion of experimentation And there are other examples we could have given you where folks have also done things to, for example, compensate a farmer whose land happens to be in the best place for recharge and turn that area not just into a recharge basin, but turn it into a wildlife refuge. You're having people are finding ways to meet multiple goals. And there are a lot of those in Northern California, in the Sac Valley. Roger's involved in even more examples of this, RD 108, different institutions all through the Northern California Water Association and elsewhere that are doing restoration to figure out how to generate survival for fish, even as they, just as zealously as anyone else, try to protect their water rights so that it's not just flow, it's doing the things that fish need, though they do need more flow. I'm just going to put my marker down for that one, but they'll need more flow if we do all these things on the ground, which again, as I say, high value, low glamour space to be in. So there are a host of them. And I know they exist certainly across Nebraska over time and across many other states. So there are a lot of them out there, and I'll write about them over time because I do think illuminating these are really, really important. There's one question about how do you answer someone who insists that healthy soil is the primary solution to drought? And I would simply say, having been involved heavily in my last job at the State Water Board in dealing with drought, and some people called me drought girl for quite a while because that's all I was doing. People frequently in a crisis will point to the thing they think is good as the one answer, and you get a flood of those. And the answer is, there's not one answer. There are many answers. And healthy soils are incredibly important to deal with climate change, to deal with being able to farm more with less water, just dealing with health, to farm with fewer synthetic chemicals and the like, a host of good things, but it is not the primary solution to drought, but it is a solution to extending our resilience. So with that, let me turn to closing thoughts for all of you. I want to thank you all. But before I give one last closing thought, let me turn to you, and I'm just going to keep in order. Roger, what one thing do you want people to come away from this with?
Yeah, thank you, Felicia, for that, because this goes back to that question that you just answered. You know, one thing that I'd really like people to take away is there's no silver bullet. There's going to be no quick fix to the problems that are facing us right now. And, you know, it's really, if there's one little slogan, fix it versus fight it, you know. And I think that's one thing that I'd really like people to take away is we've seen what happens. We can go to court over water rights and we can fight for 50 years, but that's not going to get us the solutions we're all trying to get to collectively. So I really think it's finding solutions to fix versus fight.
Great, Renata, that's great. Well said.
Okay, I feel like I talked enough about the importance and learning from variability. So at the end, I want to double down on the importance of strong governance and the importance of institutions and meeting people where they are at. So I think Nebraska having local government to manage groundwater, I think that's significant to their success. So strong institutions, extremely important to avoid conflicts of potential water uses among different users, as well as to manage the compliance, the monitoring, enforcement, which is very much needed implementing water markets.
Fabulous, fabulous, exactly right. Christina and Eric, in whatever order you want to go.
Christina, go ahead.
Perfect. I would just say the power of partnerships, right? The ability to think bigger, to think, you know, to be more innovative, to also leverage diverse funding sources, because this work is not going to come at a low cost in many regions. So I'll turn it over to Eric with that.
So I guess keeping with the theme, having started with, or slogan, having started with a new regulatory framework with no information, my slogan is data-informed decisions determine our destiny.
Oh, that's very good. You might have to email that.
Aaron Moran's going to owe me for that one for the data consortium.
That's true. Well, I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I think you all have exhibited what I think of as the best kind of leadership in being observant, in being, keeping your eye on the future, but in understanding that the details matter, and that doing the stuff is what's going to solve our problems, not just pointing fingers at other people or talking theory. So Yogi Berra would be proud of you, and I am too. So with that, thank you all for joining us today. I hope you've gotten some inspiration, a little wind beneath your wings as we work on the very challenging issues it takes to manage in a complex world, share a shared and precious resource, and make the most pop for drop. So thank you very, very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.